Hello, and welcome to the Vagabond Way podcast. The journey goes ever on with the long road. This episode, Authentic Together and Onwards. This episode, The Long Road, Steve Bonham, Kev Moore and Chris the Bish Lydon, that's me, we discuss the future of the live music industry, venues, artists and audiences working much more closely together in the rebuild post-COVID-19. Kev takes us on a jaunt to Russia for his next cafe spot, and I bring you some more of my daily bread antics. The Vagabond Way podcast featuring The Long Road is exploring the world of the troubadour, the adventurer, the vagabond. The world isn't beige, it isn't processed, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. If those are the sorts of sentiments that make your brain light up, then hop on board. We are embracing all of those things, we're celebrating all of that, and we'd love it if you joined us on the journey. Greetings, I am Chris the Bish Lydon, welcome. Now, there's much chat in this show, so only a quick intro from me. But I think I always say that these days, don't I? What's new in the world of the Vagabond Way? Well, the big news is our new YouTube show starts this coming Tuesday. Tuesday, the 1st of September 2020, sees the launch of the Transatlantic Connection Show. Head to youtube.com/thevagabondway. The show will be out every 2 weeks with a different guest each week, and perhaps even some weeks there'll be two guests. There'll be little spots from me, Steve Bonham and Kev Moore throughout the series. We talk to some of our fellow artists who are, moving in similar circles, authentic new songs born out of real experiences, real places, real people. We're still building the episodes, but we've got interviews and performances from Rob McHale, Mal McWatt, Elaine Davidson. We've got a chat with Graham Steele, who's been working relentlessly throughout lockdown, getting this kind of music out there through Facebook Live performances. And some more people, artists, journalists, people in the business, who we haven't confirmed yet, so I best not announce just in case. So why the Transatlantic Connection Show? Well, we are building a movement, which we're calling the Transatlantic Connection. We want to connect audiences, artists and venues who are into this kind of music. It's a long-term project, no easy wins here, but we want to make connections for people who like authentic, homegrown music, probably music that has one foot on either side of the Atlantic. Some artists who experienced, moving from the UK to the US, or whose ancestors did that in quite different times, perhaps, or artists from the US who have travelled, toured extensively over here in the UK and fallen in love. The US and the UK have an intertwining shared history, to say the least, and for decades, centuries, artists have been trying to work it out, share bits of it, bring it together, separate bits out with different lineages. It's a huge melting pot, and there are many rich seams to be mined. If you're listening to this podcast, there's a very strong chance, I suspect, you'll enjoy the Transatlantic Connection Show too. So do join us on YouTube from Tuesday the 1st of September 2020, youtube.com/thevagabondway, and you'll find the episodes are released there every 2 weeks on a Tuesday. Anyway, right now, on to the rest of this podcast. Now, as is always the way when we do a recording slot for the podcast, the three of us, Steve, Kevin, me, and look, I say, look, we only need two 10-minute slots for the podcast. Even with a bit of extra waffle, that will surely only take us 30 minutes to record, and without fail, it ends up being an hour and a half mammoth session. And bless Kev, he records in his studio in Spain, in the summer, where it's 36 degrees, and he can't have a fan on because the noise will ruin the recording, and here we are waffling on. So the waffle chat that I've edited out from this week's ramble chat, to save you, our dear listeners' brains from melting, the topics included counting together, or our inability to do so over a video conferencing system with, a weird time delay, Indonesian traditional music called gamelan, and how approaches differ to Western music, prisoner education in the UK, the history of Arabic written numerals, Spanish building regulations, the people cut off from society who don't know that wars are over, and finally Donald Trump. You'll hear none of those topics this week. There was also some slightly darker chat about the current state of the live music industry at the moment, understandably due to COVID-19 and its various and ever-changing effects on live music. Kev, for instance, has managed to get some live gigs in over in Spain, but things seem to be tightening up again there, and various restrictions are back in place, meaning that live music is off the cards again for a bit. Here in the UK, venues are permitted to open, but many can't, or they can't as much as they'd like, and are in financial dire straits, many of them, so taking risks perhaps isn't on the cards. Although for some, they will have been able to step back and review things and look at this time as an opportunity to make some changes for the better, perhaps. Especially some of the smaller, nimbler organisations or venues. We also talked a bit about social media and the modern age of influencers. I suppose generally we felt a lack of authenticity in some influencers' approaches. Not creating anything, but just constantly having a product or a thing to show. That sort of approach just doesn't seem to float our boat. We're creators. We want to make stuff and share it and find people who connect with it. But I think in some ways that means influencers have to be very nimble and go with the flow of trends that change sort of every day, every hour. There's perhaps some lessons to be learnt there. We do feel there is a shift away from the desire for this manufactured pop success, though. And there's a growing audience out there who want authentic, well-made, quality stuff that's born out of real stories, real connections. And that's where we pick up our chat. Thinking about how that movement can grow and build with venues, artists, audiences, all working together more in the music industry. Something that Steve and I have been talking about in the previous days before this recording. In the past, we've discussed the rise of the tribute act as a bit of a killer for new writing acts as well. Venues succumbing to perhaps the easy route of booking tribute acts because they know they'll sell, but perhaps contributing to a loss in other parts of the industry. Tribute acts have their part to play for sure, don't get me wrong, but there is a fear that for some venues they are at the expense of everything else. Okay, so we're gonna join the chat mid-flow. We are stepping into the flowing river here, people. Brace yourselves. Okay, over to me. Venues do have a part to play in helping to save themselves and the musicians who they want working there. I'm hard pushed to think of venues that I know of that actually have supported the creation of new music. They're keen for people to come in and perform there, and they want, they'll do the ticket sales and do the door split or whatever. But actually, are they putting anything into those artists that want to create stuff? Are they providing venue space for bands to rehearse during the day when the venue isn't being used as a venue?
Yeah.
Are they contributing to the growth of the industry rather than just providing a platform to people to perform at?
Absolutely.
One of the things that me and Steve we were talking about, the fact that actually part of the sort of movement we're trying to build, the artisan music and authenticity, and actually I think a key part of that ultimately is going to be finding venues that are on the same wavelength. I've experienced it in the theatre world a bit with my sort of theatre producing hat on, where venues work really hard to help grow and find the new voices, the people who want to make new things but don't have the platform yet. And I think the music industry has to go back to that sort of thing. Has to switch to that thinking a bit.
I think it has a moral obligation. I think also that's how you will rebuild, because it will be decimated. By the end of this, it will be decimated.
Yeah.
And I think it has to be done in partnership,
Yeah.
But, there are models for this, because I think you're spot on that actually, and you really made me think about it, venues have got to see themselves as more than just sticking up some posters and then booking guaranteed. If I look at the English folk scene, which has killed itself over the last 20 years, it's absolutely killed itself.
Yeah.
In its heyday, you could build your career as an artist. You knew what you had to do. You had to get on the bus, and you had to go to lots and lots of folk clubs and play 2 songs. It was called a floor spot.
Yeah.
When you did that way, you honed your craft. You learnt how to do it, and it was hard. And you might spend a couple of years doing that. As you got better, the folk clubs then had a kind of support act, the bigger ones anyway, most of the big ones, where you'd get a small amount of money for playing before the main act.
Yeah.
And then you do those for a little while. Then eventually a folk club organiser would take the risk and give you a night. Of course, by then you'd built up a following because people had seen you over a region. They'd seen you regularly. I don't know much about Scottish and Irish folk clubs, but the English ones are dead because they do not do that properly anymore.
For me, the thing that has to emerge out of all of this lockdown stuff and just the instant changes to our industry that were coming, they were on their way, whatever, and they were gradually wearing down, but it just happened very suddenly, and that was a shock to everybody. But I think the thing that has to emerge is a different ecology for how venues, artists, and audiences connect. I mean, part of the reason we're doing this podcast is to try to do that. I mean, again, the theatre industry spotted this a long time ago, and there's a sort of ecology there that exists. The music industry has to do the same because venues need to take more risks, but also venues need to work better with audiences. So the live music enthusiasts that we want to connect with, a lot of them don't feel served by the venues these days because there was such a big switch to tributes. And you've got to find, we, as part of the movement, we've got to work with venues and say we want to try rebuilding something that's been lost or forgotten, and it's because it's still out there. People will always want live music. Good new live music.
It's a trust thing, Chris, isn't it? It's a trust thing. There's a venue up the road here in Marchington, and I'm not up to date with where it's got to, but for a long time they had a lovely mix of every Sunday night. People trusted the venue.
Yeah.
The guy running it could put on a variety of acts and know he was going to get people coming in because they wanted to hear live music, and some weeks they'd know who it was. Some weeks they wouldn't. It just felt that people turned up because they trusted the promoter that this band were going to be good and worth listening to. And I love that. And then that, to me, is a great recipe for how you do it.
There's room for some tribute stuff, especially for the bands that are now sort of fading away and some of the musicians who've gone. But I feel that, like, if you photocopy relentlessly, you're on a hiding to nothing, and if there's no new input into the music scene and everything's a tribute to everything else, then it will wither and die. It's important to keep new blood coming in.
Some of it is a new approach to how those three different groups, the venues, the artists, and the audiences connect.
Yeah.
And because we don't know what the long-term effects of COVID-19 are in terms of how many people you can fit into a venue, that you have to rethink it. And actually, as we're all doing, can we do stuff live that we also do online as well? And actually, you get the best of both worlds. Then you get people who can make it. The people that can fit in the room with you safely, great. But actually, can you reach a worldwide audience, people that wouldn't ever have been able to come into the room with you?
And of course, another facet of post-COVID entertainment is how many people will have disposable income. Will people be going out and splashing out 200 quid on the big concert tickets? I don't think so. So that may turn their heads to the lower rungs and for the grassroots music, and it might flourish.
We're in the world of just having a new conversation with everybody. People have got to start talking and involving each other a lot more, and be very careful about the barriers they built. The festival scene has been, for music, for the last 10, 15 years, has been brilliant. I mean, it's kept the thing alive, kept bands going, the big bands, it's kept everybody going. But then even that was starting to kind of tail off over the last few years, and there are festivals losing lots of money. And as you were saying, Chris, it's not leaving it to somebody else. I think what we're trying to do is not leave it to someone else to go out and start talking to people, but getting on your bike, if I'm not mixing my metaphors, and like we want to connect with other musicians. Don't see your fellow musicians as competitors. You're building a marketplace.
Definitely got to interact.
Venues don't sit, because basically what venues are saying now is it's totally up to the artist to bring in the audience. I mean, that is basically the contract. I'll pay you if you can bring 50, 100, 200, 2,000 people in, or I won't pay you. It's about also being all of us being committed to quality, you know. If I'm a punter going out for a beer, or, you know, a glass of wine, or, you know, if, you know, a cup of coffee if it's you, Kev, and there's a rubbish guy hollering out Wonderwall,
Yeah.
I'm going to go and sit and drink somewhere else.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just not going to put up with that. I want to go and see someone who's genuinely good, that fascinates and entertains and interests me, and that's where I'll stay. And I'll be up for surprises.
It feels to me like we're at the sort of, we're over the hump of a shift of how things have been going the last sort of 10 years about the attitude towards like music, and I feel like there is we're on the start of the curve now for the next wave of stuff where people are saying, actually, and part of it is due to this lockdown thing, where actually people are saying the only way some things are going to survive is if we actually put a bit of money where our desires are, and you know, people say, actually, okay, yeah, I will pay £10 to your crowdfunding thing for you to, you know, record your next album or whatever, because £10 is only a small amount of the bigger pot, but to people in lockdown, £10 might be quite a lot of their disposable income. But actually it's saying, this is what I want to see more of in the future, is
and
well-made, quality stuff. It'll be the same when venues here can open. I mean, venues here can open up again now with socially distanced audiences, but a lot aren't able to. But when things get a bit easier on that front, people are going to be a bit more judicious about where they're spending their money, I think. And I'm hoping we will see a commitment to good quality local establishments who also will be able to invest in good quality local artists.
I do think that the venues and the acts are going to need to start having a bigger conversation than they have done in the past.
Born out of the idea of connecting more with people, with audiences, that's where the idea for this podcast came from, really. We really do want to connect with other artists and audiences who are out there, who are into the kind of stuff that we're into. We're not hoping to convert millions upon millions to a new musical style or genre. We want to build on the solid foundation of real, authentic music that exists and that we're creating, that we know audiences out there love. We just have to get better at connecting via social media, perhaps in the short term, whilst venues are a bit done for, but longer term in live music venues that we all want and need across this country, across the world. A point that Kev made in our chat that I had to edit out just for the flow of things this week, but it's a good point that he made. Music is often still seen as, you know, hashtag not a proper job. Music has been and forever will be so integral to the well-being of a society. You know, musicians need to be able to contribute. They need to have their spaces to try new stuff, experiment, find new connections, whilst also being able to earn a living. Most of us aren't, you know, after footballers' wages. We just want to be able to do our thing and get by. Anyway, an important part for us is giving people behind the scenes sneak peeks into how we do things. The birth of new ideas, new songs. I think it can help connect people with their own experiences to the experiences that we write, record and perform about. Today also gives an idea of how songs themselves are sort of bookmarks in the process, landmarks, waypointers, significant moments, or, you know, or reflections on the process itself. So I'm going to hand over to Steve now.
This week, Song in the Mix is a song called Western Requiem, which is another song of the songs I've been writing on this spanking new 12-string that I'm playing a lot at the moment. I'm really proud of this song. I feel it kind of sums up something. It's a kind of drawing together, you know. As you know, I have this obsession with the early days of America, the Wild West, if you like. You know, books on my shelves, competing for space, are history of New Mexico, Return to Thunder Road, which is about moonshining, all the things you never knew about Billy the Kid. And actually, you know, I have to point out at this time that I actually met Billy the Kid's third cousin in an old shop in Las Vegas. Las Vegas, New Mexico, not Las Vegas, Nevada. Otherwise, I'd have been very suspicious about that. It could have been anybody. Anyway, what was I talking about? Why am I obsessed with this? I think I just love the world. It's a world of clear lines, bad and good, right and wrong, civilization and wilderness, the frontier. It's a world of incredible human stories. There's strong characters, the outlaw, the renegade, the strong woman and the weak man, the Native American chief, the noble warrior, the drifter, the gold digger, the hunter. It goes on and on. These characters who instinctively come into your world with a backstory. You don't have to waste a lot of creative effort filling in their past, which is really handy when you're writing a song. And it's a world in which you can still touch the borderlands of it. It's a world that sits between really ancient history and now. You can drink in the bar, as I have, where Doc Holliday used to take too much alcohol, gamble a little, and shoot the odd person before retiring to the room round the back where he ran his dental practice. You can visit the ghosts of the old towns of the gold rush. You can, as I've noticed and said, spend the afternoon with a relative of Billy the Kid. There's a kind of line of sight back to something that at one hand appears mythological and at the other completely here and now. We can almost touch it. Everybody's favourite cowboy is John Wayne, who knew Wyatt Earp and modelled his nonchalant walk and drawl upon the man who in 30 seconds at the OK Corral wrote himself into history. As I found on YouTube the other day, a really old television programme. I can't remember the name of the show, but it was a show where you had to work out who somebody was, or the panel had to work out who this person was. And the mystery guest this week had seen Abraham Lincoln assassinated. That's close. That's really close. And I guess as a band, as a creative group, we're coming to the end of 2 years of really intensive work around this reimagining of the music from the soil and the ground that we talk about a lot. With our feet in British and American music and the raw materials that made up the magical music of the 20th century. And this song, Western Requiem, sort of is a way of bringing the curtain down, if you like, or the sun setting on that particular story as the new we start to think about the new CDs and the new recordings that we're going to do. This idea of wrapping it up. So this song, and I haven't, dear listener, I haven't talked to Chris or Kevin about this. I actually think this song belongs on the end of that sequence, even though in fact we have recorded all that we wanted to in this particular story. Maybe this one belongs at the end of those, and we can shuffle off a track and add this to the mix. Western Requiem seems a nice way of finishing the entire American Wilderness project before we knuckle down to The Journey Goes Ever On. So when I wrote this song, I wanted just to capture that twilight of a world which is fast disappearing, that has shaped so many imaginations and so many dreams and so many nightmares and so many stories and so many movies and so many songs. I just wanted to nail that lovely moment. There you go. The medicine man has come undone. The bomb summer touches down, and the train is westward bound. Geronimo was quit the show. John Wayne never made the Alamo. Ghost dancers dance in vain. Fires go out in summer rain. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you dance with me all night long at the desert's edge beneath the Joshua tree? Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you sing a song for me about the times when freedom called? Walk along with me. About the time that freedom called. Walk along with me. The man in black kneels down to pray. Bandit queen has simply run away, tearing up the old saloon, leaving mad dogs at the moon. Come on, bleach the coat of chrome, send the stars and the extras home, holding on the best of them. This is a Western requiem. Rosalie, oh Rosalie, would you dance with me all night long at the desert's edge beneath the Joshua tree? Rosalie, oh Rosalie, sing a song for me about the time that freedom called. Walk along with me. About the time that freedom called, and you'd walk along with me.
Hello listeners, it's me, Kev Moore, once more, with yet another edition of Kev's Cafe Corner. This week we're going to be visiting the frozen wastes of the north, specifically Russia. Now this is a cafeteria that is on the move, so it's quite an interesting story, this one. So sit back, relax and pin back your lugholes. Way back around the turn of the millennium, with Christy, we travelled to Russia to do some shows, playing in Moscow and St. Petersburg, and got to see quite a bit of the place while we were there. And I went back sometime later, but this time flying to Helsinki and getting what's known as the ice train, which takes you all the way up through Finland to where the border with Russia is, and you cross the border and then head down through Russia and into St. Petersburg. Now, the ice train is such a wonderfully evocative name for it, and it certainly lives up to it when you travel through the snow-covered frozen wastes of the north there. And I visited the cafe restaurant car in this train. It's a little bit, I suppose, like a rickety Orient Express. And as you approach the Russian border, the train slows and Russian guards get on board to examine your papers and your passport, and you just expect one of them to sort of keep your passport and say, "No, Mr. Bond, we expect you to die," which is fun. And anyway, I travelled along to the restaurant car, and it's like something from the era of the Tsars. There's beautiful cut glass everywhere, and ancient sort of cruets for the various salts and peppers and sauces and what have you. And I ordered Russian pancakes. And I can tell you, listener, there's nothing quite like sitting on an ancient Russian train in the restaurant car, surrounded by all this amazing pre-war almost paraphernalia, eating Russian pancakes and staring out at the frozen wastes beyond. There's something that comes over me when I'm on a train journey, when I'm looking out at the lights of the homesteads in the distance and the houses and the flats. And each one, it fascinates me because it represents like a microcosm of society, and you look in at one of the windows and you wonder what lives are being played out in these places, what dramas and what struggles people are going through and how their lives are unfolding. And you're just a visitor passing through, and you're passing through the sort of ghostly echoes of all these people's lives. It's something that always strikes me when I'm on a train. And I wrote a short piece about such a thing, which wasn't the Russian train journey, but I'd like to share it with you. It was about a journey I took into the heartland of Germany, and it's called The Bird and the Forgotten. The great train grumbled into Braunschweig station, almost reluctant to break its journey through the heartland of eastern Germany. Grey-green it went, the sprawling farmlands contrasting sharply with the gunmetal urban decay of its forgotten towns. I sat in my compartment contemplating the day, a long day, filled with the miasma of endless travel that would take me from post-communist poverty to the sun-kissed shores of Spain, eventually. After a cursory glance along the platform, I returned my gaze to the novel I had wisely brought along to forestall the boredom, when suddenly a soft thud and a flurry of feathers in my peripheral vision caused me to look outside. A tiny, imperceptible mark on the carriage window was the only clue. I looked down and saw a still, feathered form on the platform. Then, slowly, very slowly, it began to regain its wits and sat, stunned, alone and abandoned on the platform, a sparrow of sorts, I think, though ornithology is not one of my strong points. It looked like a confused traveller that had alighted at the wrong stop. More than a little frightened, it glanced around worriedly. The train made ready for departure, and I found myself urging it to wait, that I could longer observe and witness the outcome for this poor unfortunate. It became apparent that it was severely injured, for it moved not 1 inch, and the feet of 1,000 impatient travellers unaware were perilously close. The train conductor paced backwards, carriage by carriage, purposefully along the platform. I held my breath. He signalled the impending departure as he walked backwards, ever backwards, his boots coming down mere millimetres from the bird. I realised then, like an epiphany, I was witnessing a metaphor for modern life and the victims that fall beneath the cracks, powerless to alter their destiny, ignored by the masses, and life hanging by the slenderest of threads. Thanks for listening, everybody. Catch you later.
Baguette update. Huge thanks to our pal Jackie for sending me some baguette tips for my Bishop's Daily Bread segment. Jackie has done actual proper baguette training, apparently. I mean, this sounds to me like something you do in basic training for the Army or Air Force or something. You know, I can picture rows of people marching up and down with baguettes crisply balanced against their shoulders, or, as it might be in my case, baguettes limply dragging along the floor behind me. Jackie, fear not, I shall put your tips to use in the coming days, and attempt number 2 at baguettes is forthcoming. I shall report back. Looking back over lockdown, a few of my sort of kitchen obsessions, some of which have absolutely passed now. The desire to make homemade mozzarella, I attempted this, I can't remember how many times now, with some limited success, but it never got to the sort of heady heights I hoped for. Linked to that era was the homemade pizza with freshly grown basil, which, to be fair, I still pop out now and then. The sake of throwing some dough together in the day and leaving it to do its stuff in time for the evening isn't the greatest hardship. My basil plant is still quietly growing. A more recent trend has been donuts in their various forms: fried, baked, ring or not ring. What do you call a not ring donut? Just a donut, I guess. The cousin to the donut, the Yum Yum, a more recent experiment that went pretty well, although it's a laminated dough. It's hard to know what the shortcuts you take really mean for the result. Compared to the croissant I made, which was a full-on, 2-day process, the Yum Yums were easy, but perhaps the results weren't quite as delicious. Perhaps effort equals outcome. A frightening discovery recently was frozen donut dough, already balled, could be defrosted and fried singularly to give not quite instant, but near enough, fresh donuts quite successfully. Oops. And of course, in general terms, the various varieties and shapes of bread and bread rolls I've made over the last few months, it all adds to tools in the toolbox, I think. I'll perhaps never be a master baker, but I know how to whip up a nice country-style loaf, or indeed, a batch of Big Mac-style burger buns. I fear my recent discovery of a delicious chocolate cake recipe, though, which for no apparent reason has no eggs nor butter in it, and has rather too much coffee on the ingredients list for my initial liking, but it's still excellent. And a great chocolate frosting, as the Americans would call it. This results in a delicious cake treat, but sliced up and placed in between sheets of parchment paper and put in the freezer, it also lasts remarkably well and defrosts in about 20 minutes. Single slices of delicious chocolate cake available in minutes. This, combined with the donut discovery, will surely be the end of me. Or perhaps, the start of a cookbook. Who knows? Thanks for listening wherever in the world you are. That's this episode done with. Subscribe to the podcast. We're on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Spotify. The next episode will be out next Friday. Join us on YouTube for the Transatlantic Connection show and become part of the Transatlantic Connection movement. Head to youtube.com/The Vagabond Way. Find us on Facebook, The Vagabond Way, or Steve Bonham and the Long Road. All of our music's on Spotify and Apple Music, so go and have a listen. Give us a follow. If you like what you hear, maybe share it with your pals who might like it as well. We're on Patreon at patreon.com/The Vagabond Way. Big thank you to our Patreons, and a special shout out to Orla Flynn, James Lydon, Yvette Lydon, and Trish Taylor. Thank you. Patreon is a great platform that makes it super easy for anyone out there, you, to support content that you love on a monthly basis. It gives you direct access to the people creating the stuff you love, us, hopefully, and you get to play an integral part in shaping the direction of the things that we make. So, become a Vagabonder. That's our name for our supporters on Patreon. To help us create music, live performances, books and short stories, this weekly podcast, our YouTube show, and some new things we're cooking up. As a Vagabonder, you can get the recordings and books we make for free, receive exclusive Patreon-only merchandise in the post, get regular behind-the-scenes updates from us, unlock access to exclusive live-stream performances and Q&As, and lots more. You can help us create something different, something that entertains, and something that inspires others. So, join us on the journey and release the vagabond within. Patreon.com/The Vagabond Way. Thank you once again, brave adventurers, vagabonds and explorers, for joining us on The Vagabond Way. Remember, the world isn't beige, it's authentic, it's rich and it's real. Embrace every last bit of it. Until next time, the journey goes ever on with The Long Road. Bye for now.